We see that in America, in a late stage capitalist society, 65% of couples can't afford just one income. They need a women's income. And so what ends up happening is we have these idealized versions of what life is going to be, that we can serve somebody, that we're going to be in the kitchen, that we can make a beautiful lunch for our partner every day. And that may seem fun when you're playing house.
Exactly.
But when you actually bring children into the world, then what ends up happening is that all of your time choice gets hijacked.
Welcome to Ambition 2.0, the new podcast from Girlboss, where we're going to explore what it really costs to have it all in work, life, family, identity, and self. I'm your host, Amanda Goetz, a two-time founder, four-time CMO, mom of three, and author of Toxic Grit, How to Have It All and Actually Love What You Have. Today's guest is a New York Times bestselling author. She was raised by a single mom in New York City. She has a JD from Harvard Law. She is the leading researcher, advocate, and author of all things partnership equity. She is the go-to source for understanding domestic labor and valuing women's time, and all of her work is backed by Reese Witherspoon's company, Hello Sunshine. I'm so excited for today's episode. We are going to dive into what it means to have invisible labor, both at home and in work, and how do we build towards a life that feels equitable. So excited for today's guest, Eve Rodsky. So Eve, welcome to Ambition 2.0.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to ask this question with all of our guests. How do you think ambition has changed over the past few years? Like, what's the new definition of being ambitious?
I think the way I like to look at ambition is being led internally by your own values, as opposed to the values and time commitments that are set by other people. And so in a patriarchy, women's time is infinite. It's considered infinite like sand, and men's time is considered finite like diamonds that we guard. And so in that type of system, ambition is really set for you because it means that you're allowed to be three things as a woman. You're allowed to be a parent and or a partner and or a professional. But only a professional, God forbid, it doesn't affect your roles as a parent or partner, caretaker. So I look at ambition as saying, let's throw out what we've been taught, that our time has to be defined by how we give it to others, and let's reclaim it for ourselves and really like dig into our values.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I love that so much. I think it's fun to share how we first met.
Yes.
So I was speaking at a conference and I was speaking on how to create more space for sleep, sex, stress, and strength. And I was invited to a dinner at your house. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, had I known these things when I got married at 21 and found myself with 3 kids, getting a divorce because I was completely overwhelmed. And you share a story about how a blueberry almost ended your marriage. And I used to say like little things. It was like death by a million paper cuts. So can you share the blueberry story for those that haven't heard it?
Yes. And the way I like to say death by 1,000 cuts is that the presenting problem is never the real problem.
Exactly.
Because I'm a lawyer and a mediator. I've been saying that for years to my clients. And ultimately for women, especially, the presenting problem is not the real problem because we don't even know what the real problem is. And the real problem is that women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether they work outside the home. And in fact, women do more housework and childcare the more money they make. So that's what I'm on a mission to spread, so that people don't feel like it's them, it's their failure, like I did. And so I can tell you about that day where it was the opposite, Amanda, where I thought it was my failure. This was 2011. It was right after my second son, Ben, was born. And I had a 3-year-old at the time. And I was taking him, his name is Zach, to his toddler transition program, which in America, these programs cost our entire salaries. And they last like 20 minutes. Yep. And as I was racing to get my son to this toddler transition program, my husband, Seth, decides to send me a text. And that text just said, I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries. And I can still sort of feel triggered when I think about it, even though it's 2025. But it's the triggering is the scene, if you can help me picture the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm receiving this text as I have a breast pump and a diaper bag in the passenger seat of my car.
Yeah.
I had gifts for a newborn baby to return in the backseat of my car. I have a client contract on my lap because I'm still trying to desperately hold on to my job in the midst of all this chaos. And while all this is happening, I receive this text from Seth. And I pull over to the side of the road and I just start crying. And I think, in LA, we don't take traffic lightly. We were just talking about that. And for me to pull over and actually be late to this toddler transition program meant that something was really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the time I thought something was wrong with me, that I didn't have it together, that my marriage was ending over being the fulfiller of my husband's smoothie needs.
Right.
But really what was happening to me is what I said earlier, that I didn't know that women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family. I didn't know that I was going to become the default, or as I call in Fair Play, the she-fault parent, the she-fault caretaker. I didn't know, as one woman said to me, what my movement, what the Fair Play movement has taught her is that she actually doesn't have a magical vagina that whispers in her ear what her husband's mother wants for Christmas.
Right.
And at that point, I did think I had a magical vagina, and it was really, it led to a lot of guilt and shame. And I never, ever want any woman to feel that way again. And so that's why I've been out here since 2011 trying to spread the word that it's not our fault, that we deserve better, but we become complicit in our own oppression because we live in a system where women are expected to do certain things with their time. And it's just unfair.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to kind of go deeper on this. So you said a couple of things. First and foremost, let's just define invisible labor. So you then set out and if you haven't read Fair Play, it is truly a new framework that has helped me entering a second marriage redefine okay, there are so many things involved in each task. It's not just hey, can you take out the trash? It's thinking. And so you sat down and came up with these 100 tasks.
Yes.
And that led to Fair Play, the book and the cards and the whole movement behind it. So tell everybody who maybe is kind of still they're not maybe married yet and they're thinking about getting married. I want to kind of go into what advice would you give as they're dating and thinking about invisible labor, even in the dating part of life. How do you predict? Because for me, when I was 21 getting married, I took pride. There was this gender role pride of, I can take care of my husband. And then when I had kids and I had set this contract, it almost broke me. So if I could rewind, if we could go back and tell 21-year-old Amanda or somebody listening who's in their 20s, what advice would you give someone?
Well, I think the first thing I would just say is that I really feel for 21-year-old Amanda. I think there's a lot of 21-year-old Amandas now on TikTok trying to tell people that, yes, women can't have it all. So instead of redefining what it means to be a girl boss and having your own values direct the direction of your life, instead there's a lot of pushback to say, well, let's just lead a softer life. Right. Why not be in submission to somebody else? Why not give up our agency? And so what I would say is that I'm the ghost of your Christmas future. And I will say to you that you can listen to me as somebody who went through this, but you can also listen to me as a Harvard-trained lawyer. You can also listen to me as someone who's trained as an economist. And in any of those ways, whatever brings you credibility, I'm here to say that we tried that already, Amanda.
Yeah.
We tried what we call gender segregation. We tried right after World War II for women to enter the home and for men to go work. And guess what? It doesn't work. Women lose their agency. We see an incredible depression. We see physical ailments because of the loss of power. We see that in America, in a late stage capitalist society, 65% of couples can't afford just one income. They need a women's income. And so what ends up happening is we have these idealized versions of what life is going to be, that we can serve somebody, that we're going to be in the kitchen, that we can make a beautiful lunch for our partner every day. And that may seem fun when you're playing house.
Exactly.
But when you actually bring children into the world, then what ends up happening is that all of your time choice gets hijacked. And what that means is that you're left with a shell of who you were. And so again, we're going to end up with some fun things that we're going to talk about, and the beauty of when that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah.
But I do think between the two of us, we are best suited to talk to people, especially women who are coming right out of college into the workforce right now, and those who maybe are in the start of their career, or maybe that messy middle, to say that we see you, it's hard. And even if you decide, okay, fine, Eve, you're telling me that this is too hard to do both, I won't have kids. Well, unfortunately, you're still going to be paid less. Because even if you look like you could be a mother and you don't choose to have children, you will be penalized for what we call the motherhood penalty, which is that women get paid less as they get into the messy middle of their careers, because companies assume that they're going to leave the workforce. So remember what we said in second grade, like assumptions make an ass out of you and me, but the whole world is based on gendered assumptions. And so that's what I would say, is that you're out there, you're working hard. And if you hit those roadblocks, all I can say is that it's not you. These systems are designed to push you out of the workforce, to believe that it's your fault. And we're here to tell you that we're not here to say that we can do everything for you, because you are facing those systems, but we are here to fight for you.
Yeah. And fighting for yourself.
And to help you fight for yourself.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that's what I love about, you talk so openly about the systems that we're working with, but also the systems that you can create.
Correct.
And that's the part that gets me really riled up, especially in friends where they're like, I just have no time.
Correct.
So you've also written your second book,
Find
Your Unicorn Space. So let's talk about, let me paint a picture here. There are probably a lot of people watching and listening right now who find themselves in like a Groundhog Day life, right? They go from work all day, home. Maybe they don't have kids, but they are with a partner, or maybe they don't. And they just go from medium screen to big screen to scrolling on their small screen until they go to bed. And then all of a sudden they wake up one day and they're like, I feel so disconnected from myself. I don't know what lights me up anymore. And so I just finished your second book, and I'm obsessed with it because it's again putting the agency on the person. And you talk about how you and your husband started to say, like, I'll take Saturdays, you take Sundays. You have a day off to go do whatever you want to do. So first of all, why is this so hard for women to do this? Like, what's the internal programming there that's really hard, with or without kids, to say, I deserve some time to go do something that's not in service of others? So what's that?
Well, there were 3 hurdles that we saw. And what hurdle number 1 is women telling me that they didn't have a permission to be unavailable from their roles. That they felt that they, as we said earlier, they could be the 3 Ps. They could loudly champion that they were a parent. They could loudly champion that they were a partner, or looking for a partner if you're younger, or have people ask them a million times whether they're looking for a partner. That was socially acceptable. Or they could be a professional, but say they wanted to practice trapeze, or they wanted to get back to violin. That was sort of a pipe dream, or almost a joke when people would say, well, I would love to do that, but I can't. So I'd say that we deserve permission to be unavailable from our roles, period. Number 2, though, were women who said to me that they did believe they had a permission to be unavailable, but that when they were asserting boundaries for themselves, and boundaries are very important. Fair play is predicated on the fact that a home organization, whether it's with roommates, polyamorous, whether you have kids, is based on the success of 3, a secret formula of boundaries, systems, and communication. The systems piece is those 100 cards to divide up the work of the home. But the hardest part, Amanda, was the boundaries, because of these 3 things I'm telling you. It's hard to set a boundary if you don't believe you can be if you don't believe you could be unavailable. It's hard to set a boundary if you believe guilt and shame will ruin your unavailable time. It's hard to set it. And the third was, it's hard to set a boundary if you can't ask for what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say out there is start with what is hardest for you. Do you believe you're that person out there who really doesn't believe they deserve to be unavailable? Are you somebody who does believe they should be unavailable, but somehow you feel like when you're doing your unavailable thing, that sort of that guilt starts creeping in? Well, maybe I should just do the bills. Maybe I should just get ahead on the week for meal prep, when really you are supposed to be being unavailable and doing that thing? Or is it more of a communication issue where you would love to leave work early to go take that trapeze class, but there's no way that you could ever anticipate a scenario where you could tell your boss that you want to leave early, or tell your partner that you're not going to be home for bedtime, or tell your kids that you won't be there on a Sunday for their Little League game. So I always like to start there. And for you, I'm just curious, do you have one that is hardest for you or has been?
I would say in my 20s, and when I first had kids, it was the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a funny thing that happens when you get divorced and you're forced into co-parenting.
Yes.
Because now I have forced time away from my kids. And I wish I could have adopted almost like a co-parenting lifestyle before I got divorced. But there was so much of the shoulding, like I should be with my kids more. I need to be. I have to provide for them. All of these stories we tell ourselves about what it looks like to be a mom. And that's why it's so refreshing to have people like you and now being at this stage of my life, being like, my kids know I'm going on a book tour, and they know mommy's going to be gone for 6 weeks. And I am unapologetic about that. I will miss them, but like, this is lighting me up. And you talk about that too. So I think it's the work of getting through the stories we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also important to understand what you mean by lighting you up, because that's incredibly important. That's actually the basis of mental health. And I think people really misunderstand mental health. So maybe let's just also ground the fair play movement, which is also, as you said, sort of has this funny term, unicorn space, which I call this space and time to be you, unapologetically you, without guilt and shame. But it is a unicorn. Mm-hmm. I don't call it unicorn space because I happen to love unicorns, but I like the idea that there's a mythical, magical being that actually doesn't exist until you can reclaim it the way you did. And I think it really starts with the fact that creativity, what we're talking about, the space, and I define creativity broadly as this unicorn space, this time that lights you up. It's not optional. Mm-hmm. And it's not optional because if one understands really the definition of mental health, I think it helps. The definition of mental health, I believe, was hijacked by the word happiness. Because we always say to ourselves, well, I would just love for you to be happy. Or we say to our kids, I just want you to be happy. That really has nothing to do with mental health. Happiness is an emotion.
Right.
Or it's sort of a derivative of an emotion. But it has nothing to do with mental health. Mental health at its core is having appropriate emotions at appropriate times, and yet having the ability and strength to weather them. Mm-hmm. So I'll say that again. Appropriate emotions, which a lot for women, especially after you have kids, rage, guilt, anger, exhaustion, those are appropriate emotions. Appropriate times, AKA all day, all night when your kids are awake. And yet having the ability and strength to weather them. So when you just said the 6-week book tour would light you up, that's your ability and strength to weather all of your emotions.
Yeah. I will still have them.
You will have the emotions, but you're going to be able to weather them so much more because this book tour, lighting up means you have long-term dopamine, you have endorphins, you have oxytocin, you have all these amazing brain chemicals that really we need. And humans who don't get those turn to what I call hedonic coping. So we're going to cope with our emotions.
Yeah.
It's just, how do you want to do that? And so what I saw for women, why I had to write a whole second book called Find Your Unicorn Space, was because, and this is why I'm really the ghost of Christmas future, because this is for people who are coming out of into the workforce now. I see that when you don't get that time to be you, when you are on repeat as either a professional, a parent, a partner, all these roles, which often women serve and do, we end up doing things like taking edibles to get through an entire weekend with our kids. We start seeing an uptick in women's drinking, which is reached an all-time high. For the general population, drinking has gone down, but actually not for women, especially women with kids.
Yeah.
Because we call it mommy juice, and we sort of need this hedonic coping. Again, I'm not saying anything about that this is bad. I'm saying this is the reality. We're going to cope.
Coping skill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll sneak that cigarette. We'll doom scroll. We'll binge watch television. So these things feel good in the moment, but they don't lead to that lighting up that you're talking about, which is really what a unicorn space will do. And that's the active pursuit of curiosity, connection, sharing yourself with others, and a completion point.
Mm-hmm. I think that last one is really important because I know that at the end of the book tour, I have a vacation planned with my family.
Yes.
There's a completion point. There's like a book end at the end, literally a book end. Okay. So for someone that's watching this and maybe they are seeing all of these headlines, stressed out moms are drinking more, like it looks impossible.
Yep.
What are some maybe tips or like silver linings or some things that you're seeing? Because I think, at least in my DMs, people are like, it doesn't feel realistic. I want to have kids someday and I want to continue to kill it in my career. But career currently takes up all of my headspace and the idea of putting kids into the equation. So what advice would you have for someone who's seeing all of these headlines and they're like, how am I supposed to find what lights me up when I am constantly doing all of this?
Look, I think it's a really valid concern about America today because we have very little structural support for caregiving. And we're fighting for that. You know, I have an institute called the Fair Play Policy Institute. We're fighting for free childcare and tax credits to make things more affordable and paid leave so that people can be with their children longer, and paternity leave. There's a lot of things that we could do as a society. But until we get there, I like to say it's a both and, because there are things that you can do in your personal life. Number one, what I would say is that if you have a partner and you don't have kids yet, or you're looking for a partner, there, as I said earlier, is a secret formula. There is a secret formula. Yeah. I saw people who were doing it during the pandemic with us. They're living in a fair play world. And they understand it's a practice. And it's a practice of three things. And I'll bring those up again. It's a practice of boundaries. Yep. It's a practice of systems. And it's a practice of communication.
So they just have to keep, it's like it's a muscle. You've got to keep having those conversations. And I think that there's a fear sometimes if you've been living in a relationship that has systems or predetermined contracts that, okay, well, you do all of this and I do this, or you remember when my mom's birthday is, so you get the gift. Mm-hmm. So what advice do you have when you have to kind of like reset, or how do you bring this up to your partner where maybe the dynamic isn't that, it wasn't grounded in fair play?
Yes. Well, I think that's why I'm trying to get to, that's why I'm here today.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to people before they enter those dynamics and have those contracts. But since when do contracts not change? Men say this to me all the time. Well, I had this contract with my wife. She was going to do everything at home so I could work. First of all, it's a terrible contract because that I call that the public good, private good problem. Women are doing the public good of raising a child, whereas men are doing the private work of bringing money in, and they get to take that private good with them when they leave, and women have to start over to try to make money, and they've done the public good. So that's not a fair deal for anybody. And I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for that agency. And I'll tell you the 4 toxic messages that stop us. It's something I call being CIYOO, complicit in your own oppression. So, and we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not blaming us, but I will say, Amanda, when you were in that first relationship, we've talked about this, or I was crying on the side of the road of the blueberries. It was much easier for me to say 4 things to myself to justify why that was happening, as opposed to look in my relationship and say something had to change. I said these things to myself because it's easier than fighting a patriarchy if you're defeated and tired. And I said to myself, okay, maybe Seth expects me to get the blueberries because he makes more money than me. Even though that was not by design. I became an accidental traditionalist because he kept on working the same and I kept on taking on more unpaid labor. So, but I still gave myself that excuse. And then when I was making a lot of money, I said, well, my job is more flexible.
Yep.
So when those weren't working for me because I was still feeling sad, I would say, well, and the time it takes me to tell Seth what to do, I should just do it myself. Mm-hmm. Well, that's really the worst one as an economist because we know that that's a present value bias. Of course, it makes sense to tell someone how to do something, to put the water bottle away, how to change a diaper, how to wash dishes in an energy efficient way now so that you're not doing it over and over again for the rest of your life.
Yep.
But I kept saying that to myself. And I think the worst one was, yes, we're both, colorectal surgeons. That wasn't mine. That was a good friend of mine. We're both colorectal surgeons, but my partner is better at focusing on one task at a time where I can find the time. That's what my friend, this doctor, said to me. And I remember thinking, wow, find time. We're not Albert Einstein, right? We can't fuck with the space-time continuum.
Right.
But I think this idea of finding time is such a depressing and oppressive message that we give ourselves because what it really means is that we're going to have other things and other people and other circumstances control our time choice. Mm-hmm. And then when someone else is controlling your time choice, whether it's being in a literal prison or a metaphorical prison, like so many women tell me they're in, what it does is it creates a ton of resentment that if you can't get out, then sits in your body. And that's why we see all of these health ailments for women. Yeah. And again, so back to that secret formula. If you can understand that those are the 4 toxic messages that I just gave, flexibility, who makes more money, and the time it takes me to tell somebody I could do it myself, finding time. If you know that those are messages that actually have to be thrown out for you to be physically and mentally healthy, then you'll do it early. Mm-hmm. Or when you start seeing those trends, even if you have a mate, even I have people in polyamorous relationships who say that they were the third in the trio and they were the ones doing all the dishes and the laundry and it started to pile up even before kids. It can happen in any structure. Yep. It happens in LGBTQIA relationships. If you're looking instead of gender at money. So what I would say is, regardless of your family structure and your romantic relationships, understand that the home is an organization. Yep. And you deserve to have boundaries. You deserve to have systems and you deserve to be able to communicate what you need. Mm-hmm. And I would say start with what's hardest, as I said to you earlier. Yeah. Start with the thing like when we talked about guilt and shame. Start with what's hardest. So for Amanda and her 3 messages about what was prohibiting her at that time of her life from finding unicorn space. Maybe it was the guilt. In this time, what's prohibiting you from maybe asking for that system? Well, maybe it's the fact that, yes, I can set a boundary. I know I need a boundary. My partner and I actually are good systems thinkers, but we've never communicated about these issues. And so I just want to leave you with one story about communication. During the pandemic, there was this Facebook group that was really funny. It was called The Reason I Hate My Husband and Kids During COVID.
Yep.
And this group had 27,000 members out of the UK. And so someone alerted to me, because I'm sure those of you out there who are listening, send me a DM. If you see anything that you like, as many people do, they just tag me in a million Instagram posts or things they see. So one of the Fair Play followers said, I think you should see this group. And so I went and started to lurk in the group. And one day this woman posts, if my husband dies during COVID, it won't be because of the disease. It'll be because of me. And I just found that really funny. So I reached out to her on DM and I said, hey, I'm a researcher. My book just came out. Fair Play had come out in 2019, where I was trying to tell everybody that the home is part of your work organization. And then the pandemic happened, and then our home and work organizations blended.
The timing of that couldn't have been better, just because so many people needed to figure this out.
They did. And so Fair Play became a really big New York Times bestseller at the time. And so I said to her, we have a lot of people in this movement. I want to know how you talk about domestic life. And she writes me back right away. Thank you so much for this message. I don't talk to my partner about domestic life. This is my safe space. So, Amanda, I just want to reflect for our audience here today that this woman felt like publicly threatening to murder her partner in front of 27,000 strangers felt safer to her than asking for what she needed to that partner directly. That's how hard it is to communicate about domestic life.
Yeah.
That's why I know a lot of women say it was just easier for me to start over. These patterns were not going to change. And so what I would say is that's a great solution too.
Yep.
Fair play is not here to keep you in marriage. What it is it's a system for you to ask for what you need.
Yeah.
If you don't get what you need here, then you can
move
leave.
on. Yeah.
Yes. We have the agency
100%.
in America, thank God, to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe not in our political future, but as of today, there's still no fault divorce. It's not easy, but we're also here to help you. This is a community that if you need to move on, we are here to support you in that as well.
Exactly. And no relationship is perfect. You
Correct.
still need these tools. Like I have an amazing partner now and we communicate so well. We're both in therapy. We're both talking through what we need. Yes. And yet still we're like,
still a practice.
Who's taking out the trash? Like I say that with a little tongue in cheek, but like, and then it leads to bigger things.
Yep.
So you have to have these systems and communication boundaries in place no matter what relationship you're in. So,
and it's so much like exercise. I think what I try to implore, for people is, can you imagine going to your doctor and they say, do you feel cardio fit? And you say, well, yeah, I worked out once in 2005.
Right.
I wish it worked
I had that
way.
conversation once.
Right.
When
And so it doesn't work to say I exercised once in 2005 and I'm going to be fit forever. Mm-hmm. The same thing works for your relationship. And what I'm here to say is that boundaries are a practice. And you know why? They're a practice because guess what happens when you set a boundary? As much as your family loves you, Amanda, when you go on your book tour, guess what's going to happen? People are going to be like, you're away another day?
Right. Must be nice. I could never do
Must
that.
be nice. Wow. Sounds like a fun spa day. It doesn't matter if they love you. Right. Somebody will say that in your orbit.
For sure.
And it'll hurt and it'll bring back some of that guilt and shame. And so what I'm here to tell you is that that's actually not guilt and shame. And Dr. Becky talks about this too. Guilt is really something out of alignment with your values. You writing a book and going on this tour is in alignment with your values. It's just that there's two things in alignment with your values that you can't do at the same time. So what do you do when two things are in alignment with your values? Well, you give in if other people's discomfort is what you're going to react to if you don't hold a boundary.
Right.
So either you can say, oh, shoot, they're really upset that I'm going for an extra night. So you know what? I'm going to cancel that extra night at the hotel. I'll come home early. Yes, you could do that, but that's reacting to somebody else's discomfort. That's not guilt. And so if you can just say, I'm not guilty about this. This is my value system to have an extra night of rest before I have to go back on the road and a hotel will give me that. Then guess what? You can empathize with other people's discomfort, but it's not going to make you change your behaviors. And so
I want to just say that again. You can empathize with other people's discomfort, but it's not going to make you change your behaviors.
And that's what I pray for everybody.
I love that.
That they understand that that's why boundaries are hard. Because when you don't set them or you break them, then other people's discomfort are what is changing your behaviors. And so hold that space for the things that you value. It's what we said the first thing you asked me about ambition, right? Was holding those values.
Yep.
Do that so that you don't change your behaviors based on other people's discomfort, which I believe I was doing literally my entire life.
Same.
And then those systems, we don't have, ironically, we don't have the time. We're talking about time to really understand and go and delve into the entire Fair Play system, but it's there for them.
Yep.
It's there for anybody who's listening here. I'm sure the show notes will have every place you can find how to do the system. But that last piece too, the boundaries is difficult. And we just talked about that and why it's so painful. But the other thing that's painful is when you feel silenced for not being able to ask for what you need. And what I would say there is we're so conditioned. Hey, think about how we write a work email, right? Hey, nothing urgent. Just was hoping I could follow up or check in on. 1,000
Nudging
exclamation
this. Yeah.
points. Thank you so much, EXO,
Right.
Eve. Hope you're okay. Hope this finds you well. As women, we are penalized for direct communication styles. So we learn to either retreat, like that woman in the Facebook group, to bring that communication elsewhere, or we learn to swallow things that we need. But unfortunately, it comes back out. So we're already communicating.
Yeah.
I could go onto your Nest Cam and I'll see 100 ways you communicated about domestic life in a week. I don't even need to hear your voice. So unfortunately, people will say, well, I don't communicate about X, or I can't tell my partner why. But unfortunately, we're already communicating. And I'll just say one woman said to me, which I thought was hilarious, that she doesn't communicate about domestic life. But guess what? Anytime her partner forgets to put the laundry in the dryer, she's been dumping it on his pillow.
Yeah.
So we're already communicating.
It turns into a passive aggressive.
So I'm asking for a shift, not a start.
Yep.
If you're worried about it, it's a shift. And you know what? You can bring it up to somebody like that. We communicate about domestic life. I noticed you do it by running away and being avoidant and hiding in the bathroom and scrolling your phone for 2 hours while you're pretending to go to the bathroom. I do it by getting really loud and giving you feedback in the moment that sounds like nails on the chalkboard. Yeah. You can do it with some humor where you can recognize your patterns and really understand the best communication will happen when emotion is low and your cognition is high.
Okay, so you have had a very successful career. And I want to say one more thing about you as a human. I have been around so many women in my career, and you are somebody who continues to create space and bring other people with you. And I am just in awe of that. Like, I remember I was scrolling on TikTok and you were in a Reese Witherspoon TikTok. And it was the same day I was about to send you my arc of the book and ask you to read it. And I was like, I can't send this. She's like, buddies with Reese. And it was just so, you responded immediately and you're like, I will definitely read it. And you did. And I was just so thankful. And is this something like, what is your ethos? How do you think about how much you support and bring all of these women with you when you yourself, you have 2 kids, you're writing books, you're doing all that you're doing with Fair Play Institute? Like, what is your ethos? What is your mantra? Because I believe rising tide lifts all ships.
Yes.
But you live it. And you're,
so do you.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I just I think that a lot of women feel a scarcity mindset in their careers and what they're doing. So what have you learned over the course of just what you've built and the women you've brought with you?
And I'm laughing because I actually have a 3rd kid that I never really talk about because she's my little daughter who gets taken care of by my sons now, back to Fair Play.
Oh my goodness.
But I will say that, it's that radical generosity model. I think, yes, of course you have to protect your time. That's the number one thing I'm telling women to do. But I think that there's a way to protect your time if you're in a Fair Play system where your values get to trump other people's expectations. So again, meaning like for me, the way that I like to give back my radical generosity is blurbing books for women. I always read the books too. So that makes it a little harder in terms of time. I really want to read the book. I want to understand what someone's perspective is because it takes so long to put something out into the world. So I really want to respect what people are doing. I want to really support them there. So what I do instead is I have a campaign that says, say no to the PTA. So I make it really clear in any school that I'm in that unless there's gender parity on the PTA, then my family will not be doing school service there.
Okay.
So I can get time back in that way. There's other places like a long time ago, we did holiday cards. I remember that came off our plate. We were not going to communicate with people that way. We were going to we decided birthdays would be a big thing. We'll text somebody on their birthday. We'll leave a nice audio message. My assistant has everybody's birthday in my calendar, but we're not going to reach out on the holidays in that particular way. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of things I think within the Fair Play card structure that you can take off your plate if you want to live your values. And for me, fairness and justice and generosity are really important. Generosity is different than obligation. I think people conflate those two.
Yeah.
I had a lot of obligation, I think, growing up because half of my family is very Orthodox religious Jews. So I know what it's like to live by obligation, and I didn't want to live that way, but I did want to live generously. And I think, how could it ever harm you to help somebody else?
Right.
That's how I look at it, especially for my kids. Like, how could that actually harm you?
Yeah.
It could only help you. Other things have maybe less of an ROI, but I actually think helping somebody else, literally, there's nothing other than positivity that brings.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course. I'm not saying that we can do that all the time. I'm not saying that at all, because as we said, women are the kin keepers. We are the ones who do the emotional labor. So if you can't, don't feel guilty about it, but also understand that there's seasons. And now that my kids are turning 17, 14, and 9, there is more time to help other people.
I love that. I think the seasons piece is really important for women. Like, there's such a guilt and shame when you look, when you first get a new job, everything's imbalanced. You are prioritizing, you have to ramp. Okay. When you first have a baby.
Yes.
Like, there's so many seasons of life, but then knowing when that season needs to shift and you have more space. So
yes, for friendships. And also I'd say friendships are really important. And then obviously, self-care, I call that the happiness trio, really understanding unicorn space, self-care and adult friendships. But one thing I'll just want to say about self-care is that a lot of it has become commodified wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk
more
about
versions
that a lot.
of self-shame.
Correct. So
if I can't do 12-step skincare routine and I can't do red light therapy while I'm,
and 100 grams of protein and all this stuff, right? It's
really more
is
self-shame.
And it's always been there for women to partake in beauty and body rituals, because again, as I said earlier, patriarchy is meant to control our time. And if we're thinking about starving ourselves, then we can't be sort of knocking it down or helping others.
Right.
So
it's the idea of making yourself smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
Okay. So what's your current unicorn space right now? I think that like someday I'm going to manifest dancing on a dance floor with you, because that was your unicorn space during COVID. Yes. So has that changed? Are you still dancing?
It has. I think dance for me has always been there, and it always will be. And especially, it was really great during the pandemic because it was fun to watch. You got all these
that's when TikTok was fun too.
And TikTok, exactly. TikTok was fun. You could do all the fun dances. I could do them with my kids. Musically, but before TikTok was like those fun dances plus lip syncing. So we did a lot of that. But for me, it changed because I decided that I really wanted to be curious and share myself with the world and complete something that would also have a processing grief component. And nature has always done that for me. And so to honor my father, who was really loved the country. He lived in upstate New York on a 63-acre mountain by himself and my stepmother. So as a child, it was not fun to go there without a phone. You were just stuck in the middle of the wilderness. But it was such a beautiful place, and he loved it so much that I got off the wait list for this endurance event right after my father died. And it felt like a sign. And so since October of last year, I'd been training for this really, really intense hike. And it's with 300 other people. There's 8 of them, so you can pick which one you do. Mine was at Whistler Mountain, and you're climbing it 8 times to mimic 29,029 feet, which is the height of Everest.
Wow.
So I've been training all year for that. Talk about boundaries and other people's discomfort with you not being there to take them to school or being around on a Sunday, because this hiking takes a long time. But I just completed it. I didn't finish. So this is important. So curiosity, I wonder if I could hike like this. Share yourself with the world. The connection means you can't do it alone. It has to be in some sort of group setting. That's the signing up for this big group challenge where you have to actually brand your ascents on a board, because that's scary. And then the third is completion. For me, completion this year was trying to get to Kilimanjaro, which was 5 ascents.
Okay.
So completion is not perfection. I just hope everybody understands that.
I love that. Completion is
not perfection. And perfection in this race may have been getting to the 29,029 feet, and 70% of the people did. But there were 30% of us that didn't, and we felt like we had completed something really important and really special. And so I just did that. That was August 22nd and 23rd.
Amazing.
Hiked for almost 24 hours on my feet.
Oh my gosh.
And then I want to do it again next year. So, and then
Okay.
I'll move on probably to something else. But next year I want to get to that 29,029 feet.
Well, we'll be cheering you
Thank
on.
you.
Oh my gosh, Eve, thank you so much for being here on Ambition 2.0 with Girlboss. We're so excited. We're so thankful for all that you're doing to create fair play in the home and beyond, and helping people find their unicorn space. So thank you for all that you do. And I appreciate you for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.